In this video, you'll learn why rethinking your business processes or even your entire business is a must in the age of AI. We explore why simply bolting on AI solutions, products, and tools to your existing workflows often fail, and how reimagining these business processes to be AI native can lead to drastically better performance. Let's accelerate your business. Welcome to the AI Accelerator for Business show, brought to you by 0to60.ai, where you get the latest strategies, tactics, and information about the business benefits of artificial intelligence. My name is Carl Ye, and I'm joined by my co-host Jeff Bradshaw. And today we're talking about business operations and AI. And really the reason why I brought this up was I'm starting to think that there is an issue in terms of either slow AI adoption or fear, or why AI is not being implemented as fast as we think it could be. And it could be how businesses are actually set up.
Well, simply bolting on AI tool merely accelerates outdated, inefficient models. So it's about rethinking how you do things.
This actually stemmed from a video, or like essentially a video podcast from the Big Technology podcast, where Noah Smith was actually talking about the use of electricity and steam. So let's take a look.
This is one of the economists' favorite stories about technology, and it's the story of how electricity was incorporated into factories. So originally, you had steam-powered factories, which would essentially had a large boiler. The boiler would turn a belt or a crankshaft or something like that, and then everything would turn at the same rate. That's how factories worked. And if you see old like Mickey Mouse cartoons, he's like on this conveyor belt that's like everything like stamping something at a uniform interval. That's because that's steam-powered. You couldn't slow down. And so when electricity got invented, factory owners were like, okay, how are we going to do this? Let's rip out our steam boiler and put in an electric dynamo. It turned out that electricity released much less power than steam did, and so it was just a lot weaker, so you had to pay a lot more for the same power. So they were like, this is useless. This electricity stuff sucks, man. So they ripped it out, put in a steam boiler again, and went back to the old way. And that lasted for about 20 years until some brilliant entrepreneur said, wait a second, we could just do all of manufacturing just differently, because electricity, unlike steam, can easily be routed in parallel instead of in series. This plus, some other advantages you got, but from electricity that'll require you to reorganize the way your factory was shaped, ended up increasing productivity by about a factor of 5. So you got a 5x increase in productivity, this massive, huge increase in productivity from factory electrification. But it took decades for people to figure out we have to change not just what technology we're inputting, but the whole organization of our production process we have to reorganize. And with AI, you're seeing the initial impulse toward AI as, well, I'm just going to rip out a human employee and put in an AI chatbot instead of the human employee. Everybody mentally thinks this is how AI's gotta work. It's a human replacer. The chatbot sounds like a human, so you have to use it like a human. Well, no. And so in the end, and of course, my friend Dario Amodei of Anthropic believes that AI will get so good that eventually you will be able to just use the dumbass use case of just replacing every human with AI. But I say that we're not there yet. We keep finding reasons why AI is not quite like a human. And so replacing humans with AI doesn't quite work. However, machine tool isn't quite like a human, or electricity isn't quite like steam either. And so eventually people will come along and say, you know what, I could just organize my company entirely different to take more advantage of AI. And I don't just have to replace my humans with AI. I just have the humans do different things and the AI do different things. And I reorganize the production process in ways that I, Noah Smith, sitting here in 2025, I'm unable to imagine. And so then we will see amazing productivity growth at that point. But it would, with electricity, it took 20 years for people to sort of think of it.
So Jeff, based on that video, one thing that really got me was when they initially took the steam engine, or removed the steam engine and just tried to put in electricity, it was actually inefficient because the whole system was designed for steam, not electricity. And it took, 20 years until somebody actually said, why don't we just rebuild the system using electricity rather than trying to bolt on electricity to a steam system. And that's eventually, and the rest is history, 5 times productivity and electricity, and away we go. I'm seeing the exact same thing in terms of AI. Now, when you add AI processes to a current system, you will see productivity gains, you will see efficiency gains, but it's not as efficient or productive as if you actually rebuilt your entire system and process.
No, absolutely not. But it's also, it's a more challenging thought process when you ask somebody, if you were to rebuild your business today, how would you do it AI centric? And people have to, it's difficult. Like you have to really think about how would you do things differently, because we've been doing it this way for so many years. That's the only way we know how. And it does take a bit of time. But I think that if we can encourage, if AI creators can encourage businesses to start thinking this way, I think you're going to see a lot more advancement in the capabilities of these tools and how they can be integrated into business. Because you're right, we see it all the time. Somebody says, well, we've been doing it this way. We just want to replicate it using AI. And that's not really the best use of that AI tool.
I've noticed too, even though we developed a great process, added a great tool, built a great AI automation that everyone's bought into, it's simple to use. The potential productivity and efficiency gains are quite significant, even past the 10 to 40% that we usually start with. And then we hear nothing and people don't use whatever it is, right? That could be for a lot of reasons. But I also think, we've talked in the past about like on a Wednesday, I have 4 different deadlines before Thursday. And one of those things, I saw this demo, I've tried it, and I've tried it 1 or 2 times, but I have so many things going on. Even though I know it's inefficient, I'm probably going to still do the inefficient thing that I'm doing because I know the output. And sure, it'll take me an extra hour, but I'm pretty confident in it. And, my day is so busy, I'll just do it that way. Where this AI tool could probably save you the full hour and, it'll take you 2 minutes, but you have to double check it and so on. So the reason why that's an issue is because over the past years, could be decades, you have been doing the exact same process, whether it's this job or previous jobs, exact same workflow over and over and over again, that it's essentially how businesses have been set up or how this specific process has been set up, that even if we added that AI solution, it's kind of foreign to the entirety of the process.
100%. I mean, and again, it's, and I can't, you and I are not lazy individuals. We're motivated, but still, when you think about having to completely break down a process and rethink it, it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
Like you can get to a point where you don't have any answers and you've kind of exhausted all of your thoughts on how to do something differently. And you're just like, ugh, I'll just go back to what's proven. But again, I think that's where you start to see some of these breakthroughs. Because I see it all the time. Again, you're first to test out a lot of these AI tools, and I follow in behind you, but you take them to the next level. And I think that, but I also have seen sometimes where both of us, when we're testing tools, and you might have a certain way of doing it, or you found a result, and I maybe found a different result. When you start to bring those together, that's when the light comes on, and you start to see the real efficiencies and the gains is when you start. And I think the thing is sometimes you can't rush the process. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit of time. You can't go in and use an AI tool and go, nope, that didn't work. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit of time to integrate it and keep testing it and working with it and getting different people involved to be able to, because trying to do it on your own can definitely be exhausting and frustrating.
And I think this is where I'm starting to get a little bit more pessimistic about legacy or current organizations and, how each organization, each business has their own processes. I'm a little pessimistic that they'll actually be able to adapt for the majority of them in time to literally compete with an AI native company that doesn't need to bolt on any AI process. Their entire process has started it's revolved around AI already. So, that invoice comparison would have never been a manual process, right? Comparing invoice to statement, take that for example. It would never been manual to begin with. It would have been, oh, that's what we need to do. I'm just going to create a custom GPT to do it. So instead of trying to teach somebody to stop doing the manual and start using a custom GPT or whatever AI automation, instead of trying to break the habit, test it, break the process, and have that person redo it and trust the results and build all the systems around it. When you started it with let's say that custom GPT to begin with, and you've kind of done all the testing, that is the process rather than breaking it. So if you can see that example, there's a lot more work to add an AI to a defined process versus starting from scratch. Now, times that by 10, 20, 100 for any business, that legacy business is a massive disadvantage to companies like, oh, custom GPT, digital chatbot, AI automation, 10 agents, 20 agents, custom built here, where we can go, versus here, you're bogged down with workflows, bureaucracy, models, co-pilot, not co-pilot. They're still bogged, you're going around in circles, versus here, you're like, okay, we're already gone. And that's why I'm pessimistic.
No, totally. And I think with this too, I think again, based on past experiences, is you also, you sometimes have to wait for a few different systems to come together. And what I mean by that is I just finished watching the documentary on the cars that made America. And they were talking about Henry Ford and building the Model A and the Model T and everything. And it started to catch on, automobiles, but it never really took off until they started to build roads. Because if you didn't have the roads for the cars to drive on, the cars were very limited in their capabilities. Once they built the roads, then they could get more cars. Then that actually created a boom in the tourism industry, because now people could get to locations that were locations other than just where there were train stations. Another example is we started a streaming company in 1999 called Jetstream. We were creating streaming networks, and we went to a conference, and I said to the guy, I said, the hurdle is we need faster pipelines. We need bigger bandwidth to be so that we can stream more. And the bandwidth guy said, well, we need better content so that we have justification for building bigger pipelines. So sometimes you need different tools to kind of come together to be able to find. And I think that's with AI too, is that if I build something for my company or a certain process, I might need a different part or a different supplier to build something so that they can interact with each other.
And the thing is, we don't know what that is until that thing is developed. And that's where I think like AI, I don't know if, and I'm not sure if it's another technology that needs to be there. Does it need to be fast or something? I'm not sure, or whatever it is, where AI right now is just an add-on. It's like, oh, every single company you probably use has some sort of AI component to their tool, whether it's good or not, right? Like we're seeing every single SaaS company has to have some sort of AI, probably more so because their shareholders or their boards are like, hey, you got to have a play, versus like, do you really need one? Will your SaaS tool, will somebody use your AI whatever chatbot on your site versus, an AI like a, a Claude that could probably do your thing via MCP? And do you remember the start of the social era where every single website had some sort of social component to it? And I remember there was an Office episode where they're like, oh, the paper company website, and we're going to put a social component. They're like, why in the hell would anyone go to a paper site and like do social there? Where every single company was trying to have some sort of social component because it was hot, but not really thinking, does your company and does your audience, will they use an AI component for your, I don't know, whatever industry you're using, or are you just adding it in because everyone else is doing it?
Wait, but that's the same. That's even today. You see companies that are spending a lot of time and money and effort on social media channels, and their biggest fans are their own internal employees and not customers.
Yeah.
But they're doing it because they think they have to do it. And I think that's the thing with AI, is that there's no point in just doing AI because you think you have to do it. And again, you always say this in our presentations, is that you need to start using AI, but it needs to be tied into your business goals and objectives, because otherwise we're just playing with AI tools. Like, you've got to think about why you're using the tool and the problem that it's solving. And if it's not solving the problem, and if it's not getting you some kind of a return, then stop doing it. But it doesn't mean that AI is horrible and isn't going to work. It just, maybe you haven't found the right tool or the right application for it to be able to help, get that return.
And I think like as more and more and more AI native businesses come on, I think we'll see different like use cases and applications in different industries, right? Like one of the things that the big technology podcast was talking, Noah Smith was talking about, was the AI researchers were always asked, like, oh, and this is where the fear of job loss gets to, is can AI take over this task that humans do? And a lot of the research is either yes today or eventually it'll be yes, right? You can train it, reinforcement learning, like agents and so on. But no one ever stopped to think, what happens when, if they do that, and people are like, oh, but then the humans will be fired. I'm like, no, no, no. Now you can find different use cases, which you haven't had the time to think about, because this person, all they were doing is comparing voices for 30-40% of their time. Isn't it better to, one, upskill your people, but two, now you can think of new ways to deploy this person that doesn't have to do the boring, mundane work to more higher level tasks that will like either, a lot of companies we hear are, hey, we're just floating, like we're barely getting by. Like now you can deploy your resources to do some more amazing things. We're not even sure what that is, where now the AI can take over some of that stuff that they had to do. But no one ever takes into account or thinks about, hey, how could if I were to redeploy this person, what would that look like?
Yep.
Versus, oh, if that person's task is being done by AI, I'm just going to let them go. It's like, well, that's taking more of a simplified version versus an actual growth mentality. I want to make my business succeed. What am I going to do? Yes, I'm not saying there'll be no job loss, but I'm like, we haven't thought of the new ways that people could be deployed. We just are still thinking in the bubble of this is how a company is, because going back to my very first point, we're stuck on the processes that we built over years and decades rather than rethinking them of, hey, this process, most of it can be done by AI, but now we have a human component that can do even more stuff.
But if you think about that and the way we're trained, I mean, most people can't even think about the fact, like, why do we work a 5-day work week? Why is there even 7 days in the week? Why is there not 9 days in a week? And why do we have, an 8 to 5 work schedule? Like people just go, well, that's because that's the way it is. Well, no, that's the way society structured it for some reason. There's somebody that started to say you work Monday to Friday and you get Saturday and Sunday off, and you go to church on Sunday, and you go to Costco on Saturday morning. And
worst time to go, by the way.
yeah. But we're trained that way. And so we're trained, like even at school, we're trained to go to school, you have a recess, you play with your friends, and everything is just ingrained in us based on historical patterns or for whatever reason. And I think that's what I think people can't have a tough time looking into the future, is to kind of what would it potentially look like. So yes, maybe AI might take a bunch of jobs, but maybe the human work week turns into a 12-hour work week, and we're more efficient with our 12 hours, and the rest of the time we spend with family or out in nature. Like, who knows? But people have a tough time wrapping their heads around that, because it's like, well, no, this is the way we've done it since I've been working for the past 25 years, and it's got to continue this way.
And I think and that's where the promise of this technology is that it isn't there to just do the efficiency and productivity, which we talk about, but it's like, hey, it's turning education on its head, right? That's a fact. No matter what teachers or professors or educators think, whether your head's in the sand, you agree, it is changing your space.
Yep.
And I think it's for the better. I also think too, the way we think, not just about, when we started this with work process, but I'm like, how do you actually define productivity, efficiency, work for businesses? How do you redefine that? And where do people now start putting into that? And my pessimism of companies who, can't adapt is actually tempered by my optimism, where I think people will find new ways to be even more productive, because this changes a lot of what they do. And we see this from a lot of clients. How many businesses do we see? It's like, that's a make work activity. Like that is busy work that there's every single business guaranteed there is some sort of busy work, right? Very few businesses, especially medium-sized ones, maybe small mom and pop ones, everything's important, but like there's a lot of stuff that we do on a daily basis. If you have a job, if you have a 9 to 5 job, how much of that time is actually like, I got to do busy work?
You know, that brings up, when you talk about the education system, it reminds me of another thing that came up probably 15 years ago, and it was from Chris Anderson, who was, I think, the publisher, the editor of Wired magazine, and he talked about this concept called crowd accelerated innovation. And what it was when like a YouTube was created, what ended up happening was it took somebody, and I use the example, breakdancers. So before, you saw your local breakdancers maybe down at a park or something. But when YouTube came along, all of a sudden you could get video access to breakdancers from around the world, which allowed people to learn from other breakdancers. So breakdancing became a bigger thing. I use that as an example. I'm aging myself, but it could be anything. So because you had more access to information, it elevated everybody who was doing that. And so now if you think about that from an AI standpoint, and today, if you and I and everybody around has access to PhD level thinking, and we can challenge concepts that are even far above our instructors in a post-secondary education, or definitely the regular school system, imagine how much smarter people are going to be and how much more accelerated that education is going to be when I don't have to wait for my teacher to teach me algebra. I can learn that at 3 years old or 7 years old, but I can learn it on a new level. So I think you're going to see people get smarter way faster going forward using AI. So that totally, you're not going to have to keep people in grade 10, 11, and 12, because you might have a 14-year-old who's at a university level because they've been
quote unquote, right? That is the here's a standard that we had, a university level, whatever. I'm like, but that means nothing now, right? There was an article saying that one of the things that make people specialists or experts is because they gain the knowledge over years of a specific field. Or like, well, a 20-year-old now has access to this, can learn this faster, has literally a PhD level tutor in their pocket to tutor them in their way of learning, that can now compete with that expert. And I think one way to think about this would have been, oh, that's not fair. I went through decades of whatever. But another way to think about it is, yeah, but that expert now can take that knowledge that they've gained, leverage AI, and become something completely different. Right? So it's like, either you fear that, oh, that 20-year-old because you remain static, or it's like, hey, this is an opportunity for me, one, to leverage AI to that. But like you were saying, hey, I'm going to go talk to that 20-year-old. Why? Because the way that we were at 20 is not the same as 30, 40, 50. There's a different mentality. Now it's turning everything upside its head. And I think we got to look at it that way and think about it as hey, it's a fresh start for really anyone who wants to do something. And even if you have all this decades of knowledge, leverage that knowledge, leverage all the nuances that why you did this and all that stuff. You can take yourself even further. Now, going back to my point in terms of business, you can't think about it as a static, this is the process, I'm going to attach AI here because our business is going to remain static. Most companies doing this, their business will no longer remain, this is what we do, because this changes how we do it, which potentially change how the business model actually works, or how the entire industry actually works.
You know what, that goes back to the Y Combinator video and full stack businesses. If you don't start thinking about how to be AI centric, and we a lot of the times recommend to companies, run your business here, start to integrate AI, consider running a sideline off the side of your desk, AI centric in how you would run your business, because you may have a full stack AI company competing with you in the very near future that could potentially put you out of business if you don't start thinking AI first. And so I think it's just, and the information is there and it's accessible. And I think that's just the way businesses, the smart ones, the ones that are going to be able to compete and stay relevant, are going to have to think.
So 3 questions that you should ask yourself in terms of, in terms of business processes and AI. So the first one is, which key business processes in your company still mirrors kind of the steam engine era and would need a full rethink of AI? The second one would be, what would it take? Data, IT, security, culture. We talked about change management before, to design a process that is completely AI native. And finally, 3, a little bit thinking about the future too. How might AI agents reshape how you interact online or with your customers? Learn more about implementing AI for your business by watching these videos here. Enjoy today's episode? Want to learn how you can implement AI in your business? Then please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.